we arrived at Nikon, or Nikon as I call it. So this is the company that I use personally. This is actually filmed on Z6 Mark II. But we have some cool stuff for you. So this is a brand new Z50 Mark II, right? Bruno, talk me through what we have here. So what's new in the Mark II?
Yeah, so the really good thing about the Mark II is we've got the new flippy screen, which is really useful for creators. Tiny light, it's very much a creator focused camera. You know, it gets the headphone port, which is really cool, 10-bit analog for all the video people out there, but at the same time, for photography users, it doesn't compromise the photography shape. So it's very much, I've got a deeper grip on there, which is really nice, an amazingly bright viewfinder. So for all the photographers out there, you will also find something to love.
Okay, and what is this, full frame, crop, what is it?
Yes, it's a 20 megapixel crop sensor camera.
Crop sensor, okay.
It replaces the original Z50.
You say this is aimed at creators, so would you say this is mostly for vloggers?
Yes, vloggers, but also photographers as well, generally speaking. So it's one of the few vlogging cameras on the market that doesn't compromise the form factor for photography. And that's the really key thing. It's not a flat camera, for example. It still has a very deep grip and a very bright viewfinder. So a lot of care and attention has gone into those things for photographers as well. And it also gets the same processor as the Z6 Mark III, as the Z9 and the Z8, so you get that amazing autofocus as well.
So it's a big upgrade, basically.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay. We spoke about the quality of the video itself. You mentioned it's 10 bits?
Yeah, 10-bit analog.
So it's analog 10-bit internal?
Internal, H.265, yeah.
Awesome, and it can do external as well? Oh yeah, it's got HDMI,
We've got microphone and headphone input, so I believe headphone input was something that wasn't in the original Z50, so we've added that in as well. So, you know, if you're a creator, you might want to check your sound whilst you're recording, so really, really useful on there. You can also use the USB-C for live streaming as a plug-and-play operation. You can just plug it in and you will see it as a webcam, and you can start live streaming straight away.
It's really cool, actually. It becomes a webcam automatically, does it? Or do you need your software? Or?
On other cameras, you need software. On a Z50 Mark II, you don't need any software.
Wow.
You can just
plug and play.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool.
And you would immediately see it as a webcam.
That's great. That's something that's very useful for me, especially because I do a lot of interviews over the internet, and I need to be able to film myself at the same time, show myself to the person I'm interviewing. So this is really cool. And this is kind of an entry level, or is it a bit higher in between?
It's the second from entry level, so it sits above the Z30, but below the ZFC, for example.
So what's next? What's after that from the new stuff? I think you're holding that one.
So we've got the Z6 Mark III, which is kind of our newest full-frame entrance. So it replaces the Z6 Mark II, which you're filming this on at the moment. And different from that camera, it adds the flippy screen as well. So I think that's something that we've had a lot of feedback from the Gen 2 bodies, is into a lot of people do want the flippy screen. They want to be able to see themselves, but not only that, you want to be able to have, you know, the ability to put the camera right above you or right below you for those photographers as well, because that's something that we're really keen to doing, is we want to really focus on video without compromising the photographers. That's the thing that we want to do.
Okay, and these both have the same screen, do they?
Yes, they'll both have the same resolution screen. It flips in the same way.
It sounds like nothing, really, but with weddings, with filming yourself, as you said, you need these angles that are just weird. And just having the functionality of moving the screen wherever you want is essential, absolutely essential. Yeah. And this is something it's the only thing I'm actually missing on Z6 Mark II right now, and I have one as well. So it's something that was kind of at the back of my head that I really wanted. This is why I was thinking about Z8, but then Z6 Mark III came out. And you mentioned earlier that it's very similar to Z8?
Oh yeah, it's got the same base architecture, so they've got the same processor, which is the new X-Speed 7. And in terms of menu layout and things that you can customize, is almost identical. There's very few differences between them in terms of going through the menus and the functions that are available to you. In terms of video, they're pretty much identical. They can both film RAW at their maximum resolutions, for example. So the Z8 being 8.3K and the Z6 Mark III being 6K, because of the 45 and 24 megapixels respectively. They both feature, the same kind of card slots, the same batteries and things like that. So they are very similar, but they each have their own advantages. I'd probably consider the Z8 and Z6 III in a way to be at the same level, with each having their own advantages.
Okay, you just mentioned the cards, and I've noticed that there's no flap on this camera here.
Yes, it's on the bottom.
Okay, so is it on the side on the Z6? Okay,
yeah, so this is the same as Z6 Mark II.
Perfect. And these are SD cards or XC,
so you've
whatever?
got XQD and CF Express on the first card, and then you've got a UHS 2 SD port on the second slot.
Awesome, awesome. So what you're telling me now is Z8 is the smaller version of Z9.
Yes.
Z6 Mark II is the Mark III, sorry, is the smaller version of Z8.
Exactly. There you go.
So, and then next down is Z50, is it? Or Z5?
No, we've got a big range now. So we've got the Z6 Mark II, which still very much is in the range. We're not doing away with that. We've got the Z7 Mark II as well. We've got the ZF.
Z7, of course, yeah.
Yeah, we've got the ZF, which is essentially a very similar sensor to what you find in a Mark III. You also get the same processor as the Z6 Mark III in a retro styled body, so that is also another option. We've got the Z5 below that, the Z50 Mark II, the ZF-C, so we've got a massive range at the moment.
Is there a Z7 Mark III, is it coming, or two?
Whilst we don't comment on any future releases,
okay.
I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about in the coming years.
So I mentioned this because I've spoken to Thomas Heaton last year in Birmingham. Actually, I've interviewed him, and he started. No, actually, he upgraded from something Fujifilm. I can't remember what it was now, to Nikon Z7. I forget. Is it Mark 1 and 2 or is it just
Mark
1?
1 and 2.
1, 2. Yeah. So I forget which one he actually picked, but he went to Z7, and at the same time I was like, I want a Nikon. So. It was a bit too expensive for me, so I went with Z6. But then I figured Z7 has a massive sensor, so I don't actually need that much resolution for what I do. And that's why I went with that. So my next kind of hope is to be able to get Z8 or Z9. But you mentioned that Z6 Mark III is actually so close to Z8 that there may not be much point in getting that,
right? It depends on what you want to do. So for example, I think they have their unique qualities. Yeah. So the base level of features is exactly the same, but as you start to exploring other features, that's where you start to see the differences. So for example, that's 24 megapixels, the Z8 is 45, yes. Right? But the other differences as well is the viewfinder of the Z6 III is actually brighter and sharper. It's a brand new viewfinder, which is really nice. So it's a benefit for the Z6 III. You also have a better in-body stabilization on the Z6 III as well, because it's accounting up to 8 stops, which with the Z8 is 5.5, I believe. So there is a bit of an improvement there as well. But on the Z8, because you've got the fully stacked sensor, you don't have an mechanical shutter, which means you can have the mechanical shield that comes down to protect your sensor against dust. So that's an advantage to the Z8. So depending on what your style of photography or video, there will be advantages to one or the other camera, you know. And obviously you do get more megapixels with the Z8, so you can crop more, and it does unlock 8K, for example, which that won't have. So.
And I think you mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was on camera or not, but you mentioned the autofocus is the same on Z6
yeah, so they've
Mark
got exactly the same algorithms. So the same processor, the same algorithms. The only current difference on the autofocus is to do with bird detection autofocus.
Birds,
so
okay.
on the Z8, you have a specific small bird detection mode that you can select individually, whereas on the Z6 III, that's kind of bolted together in the generic animal detection. So on the Z8, you can split birds from other animals, and on this one, it's just kind of one generic animal detection. But in terms of performance, they're extremely close.
The last thing I wanted to ask is this monstrosity here. Yeah. So this is the top of the line Z9, right? And it's, what does it have, the Sigma Classic, is it?
So actually, I'll show you, there's a couple of things on it. So we've got a PL mount adapter, which is kind of a cinema standard of lenses. And we've got a Sigma T2.5 Classic cinema lens. And it goes to show the power of the Z mount. I mean, the Z mount is one of the largest mounts with the shortest flange distance between the mount and the sensor, which means whatever type of lens that you want to put on the Z9 or the Z8 or any of the other Nikon cameras, you can. And this is just there with the cinema rig. I've got a follow focus here, which is pretty standard as well, and a monitor.
It's very interesting that you've got some like different parts of the market covered with different gear.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I suppose with Z9 you wouldn't really buy it for filming, you would probably buy Z8, right, for filming?
Well, it depends. I mean, the Z9 has got a really, really good battery, for example, which will last you about 2 hours with filming. Whereas with the Z8, you probably get about half that. So it depends on what type of filming that you want to do. Also, the Z9 is used a lot in kind of adventure filmmaking in the North Pole and places like that, where it's really cold and really windy and rainy and things like that, where you want a tough camera that will last all day in terms of battery life. And the Z9 is fantastic for that. Also, NASA is currently using the Z9 in the International Space Station. Absolutely. So for things when you want a tough camera, absolutely take the Z9. The Z8 is still very tough, but it does use a smaller battery. So if you are planning to record, you know, for several hours at a time, you'd probably be better off with the Z9.
So you mentioned the battery is different on Z9 Z9. I've never actually seen one of these, so I'll pull it out.
It's about 2.5 times more power compared to the standard batteries. So you can see it there. I'll put it next to each other so you can see.
Right, so if I use currently about 30 of these for my 2 cameras,
yeah, maybe 50.
I need like half of them. Yeah, exactly. That's
exactly.
Well, you mentioned earlier that these cameras, the Z9s, are made for tough conditions.
Yes.
I can tell you a little story. Well, it's not a long one, but this camera here that we are filming with right now went to Iceland with me, and I filmed my wife under a waterfall.
Oh, Jesus, okay.
I was under the waterfall as well. And also we travel a lot to like Wales, where it's always wet.
Yeah.
So I can't say I've ever seen anything wrong with the glass, with the camera. Obviously you have to dry it out, and you can't like just have it under the tap. So that's normal with any camera. But it just survived all without any issues at all. So Iceland, it was -10. Snow and rain, depending on the weather, and it was all perfectly fine. And this has been like what 4 years ago, whenever the Mark II came out.
Yeah. 2020, I think it was.
Yeah. So this is my little story about the how good the Z9 is. Before we move on, can you tell me who is like this camera aimed at, this one, and obviously the top of the line we know roughly, but.
Absolutely. So the Z50 Mark II is designed very much for creators in social media, generically speaking, but also at the same time, people that want a backup to their bigger cameras. So when we launched the Z50 Mark II, we very much targeted it towards creators in social media. But we found that actually a lot of photographers loved it because it shares a lot of features with the bigger bodies. You get XP7 in there, you get 3D tracking, just the same as these guys. So actually, as a smaller backup, we found that it's been really, really popular. But primarily creators of all kinds. We want to make sure that whether you're a photographer or whether you're a videographer, you're getting the best in something that's very easy to use.
So this will be your second stop, really, because the first one you said, I think Z30, is that right?
Yes, so Z30 is kind of our entry level.
Then Z50 Mark II or Mark I, whichever one you prefer, I suppose. And then is it Z5 or Z6?
We've got ZFC as well, which is the retro styled.
I actually want one of those. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I love it.
Absolutely gorgeous. But then the full frame starts with the Z5. Essentially, the full frame lineup is Z5, Z6, Mark II, Mark III, and then you've got Z7 Mark II, Z8, and Z9.
I actually love the look of ZF. It's just so beautiful. And is it Z6 inside, pretty much?
Kind of. So it's really interesting because when the ZF came out, it's what everybody thought a Z6 Mark III would be. It had the newer processor. It had kind of faster shooting speeds. It had a lot of really nice upgrades. The autofocus was improved as well. So it's everything people wanted to be on a Z6 Mark III. But the Z6 Mark III actually went even beyond that and added in a lot more things. So it's in a way, yes, but actually the Z6 Mark III does take it the next level with the partially stacked sensor and all of the video features that it brings.
Do you think Nikon is going to go into bigger sensors?
We don't like to rule anything out, but at the same time we can't comment on future products, but we'll see what happens in due time. In regards to Red and the acquisition, we have already started working with them on some things. For example, all of the lookup tables, LUTs that the Red cameras use have now been ported to the Nikon Z mount.
Which I use as well.
Exactly, so you can use all the same color profiles as the Red cinema camera, which is absolutely fantastic.
So is there, apart from the LUTs, is there anything actually out that uses the Red technology, or?
I mean, it's still early days. I mean, it hasn't even been a full year since the announcement. So I'm sure there'll be more stuff in due time.
I obviously know this is probably a big secret, but do you know anything about what direction they may go?
I think the way that we're planning, generally speaking, across the board, is very much hybrid shooters, creators. We want to enable people to be flexible. In previous years, you'd have to buy a photography camera and then a video camera. If you can have cinema level quality features in a small camera like this that you can also take photos with, then we're enabling that creator to better create images. And I think that's what we're all about. Very much focusing on video as well, because as a photography brand, we're very well known as a photography brand, but we're trying to get into video as much as possible.
This is where Nikon's pedigree is in photography, and like with the Z lineup, you're trying to get into the filming market, and I think it's a very good step forward, and especially now with the acquisition of red, obviously you can't tell me much, but I'm kind of hoping that this is going to arrive in Nikons, and maybe we can have reds with some Nikon technology, because this is also a very interesting stuff.
You know, a funny story was on the first visit of Nikon to Red, they already brought their engineers and they were talking. There's a really interesting interview of the ex-Red CEO talking about that and how they kind of got to work straight away. So I'm sure that there is a lot of things that will happen going forward.
I'm so glad that it's not just like a takeover, it's more let's work together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because Red is still very much their own company, and they will make their own decisions.
Absolutely, and this is incredible. I can't wait for this stuff to come out, and like part of me wants to wait for this stuff to come out, but it's only early days, so it may be a few years. So I think I'll settle on Z6 Mark III, or maybe Z8. Oh, this is 9, but Z8 at some point. But yeah, it's really tempting, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Z8 and the Z9 were both everything that we had in terms of technology coming together and perfectly executed, and it's been hugely popular. I think part of the reason is that we managed to get all of the hybrid shooting stuff right. You know, we've put all the features in the camera that people have been asking for in terms of video, without compromising the form factor and the feel of the photography.
Last thing I wanted to tell you is that on my YouTube channels, because I've got a couple, we've done like a contest for the best gear of 2024. And Z8 won the best camera of the year.
Fantastic. That's what
so yeah, just wanted to tell you. Like,
absolutely. Well, hopefully this will win next time as well.
I haven't had a chance to test it. Maybe that's why, to be honest. But and it was just out when we announced it, so it wasn't really enough time to test anyway. But yeah, Z8 is incredible, and I'm hoping to play with this a bit more.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a few here.
Yeah.
Welcome you.
I'll take one home.
Put your running shoes on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot.